Cheers, everyone. Happy New Year, if it's New Year yet when you're watching this. I'm filming this around lunchtime on Sunday, January 31st. So the last dregs of 2017. This is mostly going to be a haul with a little bit of vlog-like discussion, a sleepy vlog discussion, but I'm not sure how much. Probably more of a haul. One thing after another has kept me from doing videos, even up to last night. So here I am at last. I think it's been 3 weeks, but before then I was putting out a video every day or every other day. So I was enjoying the velocity, although it seems during this year my number of views per video has decreased. But I don't think the daily videos decreased it somewhat, but I think the decrease was there even without those. So I think I'm just well past my prime as a YouTube comic book person, and there's not so many new people jumping on the bandwagon, and old people disappear slowly, and that's just the way it is. Maybe I've talked a little bit with Wednesday Serial about starting a podcast. I think he's been doing YouTube videos far longer, so he's further down that path of where you no longer have the momentum, I suppose. But anyway, it might be fun to do a podcast, but it's more expensive. You've got to pay some podcast hosting site, as far as I understand. Maybe there's some way to do it yourself. If there is, it's probably pretty labor intensive, I'm guessing, is why there are those hosting sites. And even with a podcast hosting site, you're going to be doing a bit more work than what I do now, which is just shoot a video and upload it. Bingo, bango, done. So we'll see whether that... There's a bunch of things that might happen in 2018, but that probably won't. One thing I'm definitely doing is I'm going to go talk to a printer very soon, and then I will lay out my ideas for the free fanzine that I want to do, free one-issue fanzine I want to do for anyone in the YouTube community who wants to be involved. So let me show you the books I picked up. On Friday, I picked up my new comics. That was the first time I had time to do it. I thought I was going to do a haul video then, so in my stubborn way, I still want to do a haul video for my new comics. I got Eternity. This is the only one of the new ones I've read so far. It's pretty satisfying, pretty fun. In typical Matt Kindt way, I feel emotionally distanced from it. So I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the ideas. I felt like I was floating above it, observing calmly the events. I got Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. I'm still behind on that, although enjoying what I've read so far. Hellblazer, I'm not too excited about the next issue by Richard Kadrey. Tim Seeley's returning soon, and I think it's going to be pretty much his comic from there on out for a while, I'm hoping. And I have some faith in Tim Seeley that he can improve the state of Hellblazer, so I'm going to stick with it. Seem to be in the mood for a couple more horror comics that I'm getting. Speaking of horror, wow, that looks like a horror comic. I am behind on my Detective Comics, so I don't know if that's Bruce Wayne Batman or Tim from the future Batman, and it looks rather gruesome. I got my shop got Coyotes #1 at last, a second print, I believe. Second print. I had it on my pull list, but then they somehow only managed to get it starting with issue 2. That seems to happen, like issue 2 or issue 3 suddenly shows up of something I ordered a long time ago. And it's, given the way comics are written, it's unfair to me to start with issue 2 or issue 3, particularly when I ordered it far in advance. I almost just told him, forget it, I won't get Coyotes, but I felt bad for him. And so hopefully Coyotes is good. It's written by Sean Lewis, who did that book Saints, which I liked. So I'm hoping he will become an even better writer. Saints was good but flawed, but I think it was his first comic that he ever wrote. Demon Hell is Earth. Speaking of horror comics, this is another one that I liked the first issue. It was very much like a horror comic. This DC Universe thing here is growing on me. I really did like the Rebirth little drapes there. I liked the way they framed the covers, but most other people didn't. And I agree with those who are missing where they used to put the little title of what the current arc is up there. Savage Dragon. I thought I dropped this, but I guess I forgot to. And maybe I won't drop it. I like it, but I just, if you remember from a few videos ago, I felt sandbagged by it a little bit. And just in terms of something that I want to have in my house that my daughter might accidentally look at. Exo Man of War, still another Matt Kint one. Still pretty fun to read. The art has progressively become more looking like a video game, looking like screenshots from a video game. So I'm not sure if I like that or not. Maybe it'll grow on me. Fujitsu, kind of a fun comic. I'm gonna think about whether to drop it when the first arc ends. I feel on the edge with all the Aftershock comics because they're good, but they're never, well, with the exception of the Warren Ellis one, which he never completed, they're never blow my mind great, but they're expensive and they're only 22 pages long and all that. Speaking of a very good deal, I really loved, this is $6 for a book-like 48-page issue, no ads, great art, loved the writing in the first issue. I had a bit of a problem with the lettering in the first issue, the cursive lettering. It was a little hard to read. But this is the real goods, and I'm really enjoying it. It's not a Batman story. It's a story about someone who has fantasies about Batman, and perhaps it's developing into a horror story too. I'm not sure. The other nice thing is like the first 48-page issue, although it continues into this issue, it also felt like a complete episode, let's say, in a series rather than just a little snatch of something with a cliffhanger or something like that. So you could probably pick up individual copies of Batman Creature of the Night and enjoy it. Commandy Challenge. There's some good artists in this issue. I actually kind of love this Frank Miller cover. And it's written by Gail Simone, so that's promising. And then there's a part at the end by Paul Levitz. I haven't read it yet except for a few pages. But I'm assuming it might be better than many of the intervening issues, but that's the best case scenario. that I would have bought it anyway. So that Commandy, because of my Commandy affection and my peak love for Jack Kirby this year. But and then I grabbed Super Sons, which is a comic I've dropped. I figured I would read it in trade. But it's a part 2 of a story that started in Superman. And so I am forced to buy it and get a more expensive comic than I might have. It's making me think I'm very much on the verge of dropping Superman anyway. I've already dropped Action, so we'll see. I also got Image Plus. I need to sit down and read these Image Pluses more thoroughly. I enjoy them, but I kind of let them slide. The theme of 2017 for me, I guess, would be too much to read. I've kind of upped the amount of comics I bought. Around the time, actually a year and a half ago, around the time my uncle died, I just started buying more comics. I increased my pull, and I think I also started buying more trades. Although I may have cut down a bit on the back issues, like the 50-cent box issues. But Friday, I had a little free time at the comic book shop, and I started browsing through the 50-cent boxes, and he'd added a ton since I had a ton of stuff that I hadn't seen since I last perused those boxes a few months ago. So, but basically I feel like the theme in my comic book reading was too many comic books or too many purchases. I don't regret the purchases. They're all things I would like to read at some point. It's almost like I'll need to retire early to read them all, though. And I think it's a psychological thing. It makes me happier to feel like I have tons of stuff to read that I'm going to like. And it helps me get through some other things. So let me show you. I got, not from the 50-cent box, I actually got 3 silver and bronze comics, but one of them I've already shipped off to someone else, a Captain America. But I saw this cover and I suddenly realized I read this at the very beginning of my comic book reading, purchasing career. But I hadn't remembered it. Like I have what I think of as the order of the first 3 comics I bought, but this was probably number 2 or number 3 or somewhere in there. Or maybe there were more comics involved in the early days that just disappeared quicker. So I think that I got this comic sometime when my family was like at a cabin in the woods somewhere. So maybe we stopped at a store and I found this, and I think I read it at the cabin a couple of times and then lost it. So it wasn't one that stayed more in my memory. Most of my other comics I saved and then sold all when I was 16. So from 10 to 16, I saved all my comics. So anyway, it's got art by one of my sort of new old favorites, Herb Trimpe. Great Herb Trimpe cover, as always. It's written by Mike Fredericks, who is not a favorite writer of mine when I look back at these things. But still, I'm really looking forward to reading it and seeing what memories it stirs up. I already, just looking at it, have this feeling of being with my family in a cabin and just craving to be off in my imaginary world and not dealing with the family. Sorry, family. So anyway, that was really a cool find for me. And this one was just inexpensive, and I really liked the cover. I put these in Mylar myself. They did not come in Mylar. So somehow that cover really appealed to me, the way the figures look so big against the background of space, and the combination of colors somehow works. Strangely, it's also written by Gary Fredericks, and a writer from the Bronze Age and Silver Age that I tend to just completely forget about. I don't remember any. I guess he's a co-creator of, or possibly a co-creator of, the modern Ghost Rider. But other than that, I just don't remember much of him. It's kind of a blank. And then here's a ton I'll just show you quickly that I picked out from the 50-cent bin. I got 2 issues of Captain Carrot. I'm not sure. My daughter's not interested in Captain Carrot, but I am. Or I might give it away to someone with kids. I got this issue of Doctor Strange. It first caught my eye because it I could tell it was late 80s or 90s, which is not my favorite period, especially for Marvel Comics. But it has Silver Surfer and Doctor Strange, and I like that idea. And then I opened it and saw that the artist was Tony Dezuniga. Tony Dezuniga. I never knew how to... As a kid, I always pronounced his name Tony Dezunia, and I don't know why. But I still, in my head, is Tony Dezunia. Now, maybe because it was the late 80s or 90s, I think this is early 90s, Tony no longer felt, maybe felt he shouldn't do the heavy inking that he used to do. But I'm a bit disappointed by that. But still, it's kind of cool to see. I didn't know that Designina was still in comics at all in 1991. It does say guest penciler, so maybe it was just right as he was fading out from comics. It is making me sad looking at this, the lack of detail from Tony Desi. And Tony was one of the mainstays of... I got these in the wrong order. One of the mainstays of Jonah Hex. I don't think he was involved in this probably ill-fated and ill-conceived Jonah Hex in the future called Hex. But for 50 cents, I thought I'd read a few issues. Strangely, I got issue 6. issue 8 and issue 10. I kind of like these covers, actually. They're from the late 80s, and they kind of capture that late 80s style of covers. Now, the 90s, another Ghost Rider. Wait, no, I haven't got to the other. So, a 2-part Ghost Rider story with some really nice looking art, especially the covers, by Dennis Cowan. He really strikes me as kind of a cross between Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz. I haven't always liked his artwork, but I like the look of it here. So he was somebody who was still doing good work in the 90s. He wasn't too influenced by the art that I don't like in the 90s. Mike Manley is the inker. So also kind of cool. Somehow I do like Ghost Rider, even though I don't know how many good runs he had, like Mike Frederick's run. I don't know if that was that good. So next, okay, see, here's another Ghost Rider, Daredevil and Ghost Rider, which intrigued me. And I was further intrigued because I opened it up, and the art is by Lee Weeks, who's sort of back in my awareness. I actually seem to remember him on the Hulk or something else like that, but I'd forgotten that he had done a Daredevil run. So I thought, wow, I'll get some Lee Weeks art for 50 cents. That sounds good. The writer is DJ Chichester or Chichester? I don't know who he is. I've seen his name on Daredevils, but I don't think I've actually read the Daredevils he's written before. And so I grabbed the next issue was there, and it had a cover by Lee Weeks. On the inside, though, it turns out the art is by Ron Garney. It's not bad, but I wanted more Lee Weeks. Then I got 3 Conan comics that just happened to be there that I don't own anymore. This one's interesting. If you notice, all these covers are penciled by John Buscema, but this one I can tell is also inked by John Buscema. He had a more minimal inking style, but it kind of emphasized the blacks, I felt, although it's less obvious in this cover. But it's less engraved looking the way Ernie Chan's art inking over him looked. Anyway, I'm glad to get those 3. Then I got this Challenges of the Unknown at some point, maybe around 2000 was it? DC was doing these fake Silver Age comics, one-shots. Turns out I already had this one. I didn't realize. And I also already had this issue of Dalgota. I'm missing one issue, but not this one. And this is issue 7. I still need to keep hunting for that one other issue. Then I knew I was double dipping on Camelot 3000. I think I want to get 2 sets of it. Why is not entirely rational. Maybe to give one set to someone else eventually. I love the covers. And this is one of the few comics I know of that Brian Bolin was the penciler. He was not the inker on it, and it would have been even better if he had inked it. Also double dipping, and maybe I want to get multiple sets of the short Captain Victory run from Jack Kirby. Both of these are great covers. They're in nice condition. Maybe is that the first appearance of Ms. Mystic? Or is she making a return? I don't know if she's making a return to comics, or that was how they often introduce people in backups and then give them their own comics. I don't know if she later came out from Pacific. It's interesting to have a comic with both Kirby and Neil Adams in it. Coming in 1982, so I guess it hadn't come out yet. I didn't know Captain Victory came out that early. Somehow I thought it was... it's also 1982. It must have actually come out right around New Year's of 81, 82. I thought it came out later. And then I found a whole bunch of this obscure, unwanted comic that I like to collect whenever I find it cheaply, because I think it's really fun and funny and odd. Badger, number 28, 29, 40. The amazing thing, I mean, no one is interested in Badger anymore, but it went on for a long time. I think it never had the right artist. 43. Oh, 42, out of order there. 28. Oh, I thought I had them in order. 26, sorry. That doesn't look like the cover of a comical comic book. It was written by Mike Barron. The art was just kind of not as much of a standout. And there was just a variety of artists on it, I think. That's number 44. And not last, but certainly not least, one issue of a Kelly Jones era Batman. I guess later in the 90s. I must have dropped off it then. I didn't know Jones had come back to Batman or had continued with Batman. But I really love this artwork, so I'm going to look for more of this later Jones run on Batman. And I think that DC ought to bring him back to Batman. They've had him do a little bit of work, like the Swamp Thing miniseries he did with Len Wein. So I think what I have to do in the new year is cull my pull list a little and also do a big culling on the comics, the new comics I purchased since about 2010. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm just never going to want to read again. It's not of any value, like Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin Eternal. So I'm reluctant to let go of those things, but I think I'm going to cull out stuff like that. Other series that just turned out to be disappointing or that I didn't follow for very long. If anyone's interested in receiving big chunks of comics, I'd be happy to mail some to you if you're in the U.S. because of postal costs. But and that's going to be kind of a big project. I've been collecting more and more, collecting or recollecting more and more bronze and silver, and a lot of those are not yet in Mylar, and I want all of those in Mylar. And I have a lot of Mylar. I just need to sit down and put all the comics into the Mylar. So let me show you some trades that I picked up in the past month or so. I got this one, Ancestor, by Matt Sheehan and Malachi Ward. They co-script it, and then one pencils and one inks, and the inker, the one who does the inking, also does the coloring. I actually really like the coloring in here, and it partially looks better for this kind of muted coloring because it's on matte paper. I wish there were more trades on matte paper. I have a few of their self-published comics, I think they were self-published, where the art seemed more inky, more detailed, and here they're letting the color maybe do more of the work or something. There's more space in the art, and your eye, it leads you to, maybe because the inker also was the colorist, leads you to more focus on the color and less on the lines in a way. I haven't read this yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So then I was finally got around to something I'd been meaning to do for a long time, and then I started thinking I better do this in case it goes out of print, which is to get all 3 hardback volumes of Godland, the Celestial Edition. A really fun sort of cosmic Kirby tribute. I actually read about the first third of this run in floppies, but I wanted to have it all in hardback rather than just fill in the floppies, especially because this is oversized and these are very nice volumes. However, they have this odd binding that looks like a sewn binding, but then I don't know what you call this part of the binding, is glued to the cardboard portion of the hardback, which is not how a good binding is done. So that is the way 2 of the volumes are done. Volume 2 isn't glued, and so it folds properly. I know I seem to some people silly to worry about this, but it totally, having that gap there totally changes the way the book lies. If you're lying it down on a table and reading it, and you get either no or almost no gutter loss when there's when images continue from one page to the other. I'm almost wondering if when they did this, the printer, and usually it's a printer in China who does these fancy hardback books, if the printer got it wrong on 2 of the volumes, since one of the volumes is done right. Like, did they accidentally add glue to that binding? Volume 3 feels slightly thicker. I hope they weren't feeling rushed to wrap up the series. So let me find an example where the pages. Maybe they only that middle issue had pages where they had to worry so much about gutter loss. No. So here you go. With that glued binding, you just can't open it up as wide, and you miss something there. They all cost the same. They all have a price of $35. I think I got them $20 each on in-stock trade. 19 something. So anyway, but despite that, I'm really pleased to have them in this oversized. I want to sit down and read them all. It's more the art than the story, but I remember really liking the wacky villains and the sort of silly over-the-top cosmic stuff. There's a lot of cheesy dialogue and stuff. There's a whole side of my collection that's just people doing pastiches of Jack Kirby, which is good. I mean, I keep buying it, but it's not original, right? It's kind of a funny thing. So here is one of the original Kirby cosmic things. This is the entirety of the Jack Kirby's Fourth World work in one omnibus. I think it's the equivalent of maybe more than 50 issues. I haven't counted, but I believe it includes the Hunger Dogs and the other. I'm going to take the dust jacket off. There's a nice hard images on the hardcover. But even though this is a sewn binding, I don't know if there would have been an even more expensive binding. It feels tight. And it's kind of ridiculous to own this. It's so heavy. You couldn't comfortably read it anyway but resting on a table for any period of time. My shoulders are getting sore just holding it right now. But I just had to get it. And it's kind of nice. I think I might try reading the entire saga this way. I own most of these digitally. I own most of these in print, the original copies. I also own the New Gods in the reprints they did in the 80s, the Baxter reprints. Anyway, so a little bit more to add to my Kirby obsession. I thought I'd get it now instead of later because I think I got 52% off the cover price from in stock because I'd already bought something else, the Godland stuff, plus it was still 50% off. So, yeah, real happy with that. The irony is I keep in my mind thinking maybe I should get hardbacks and stuff and then maybe read more digital comics. And I didn't get this for that purpose. I already have an iPad, but my daughter more and more just sort of takes over the iPad. And we had a Chromebook, and I kept ending up having to use the Chromebook, and it had poor resolution. It was okay for young people's eyes, but not for my eyes. So I ordered this Chromebook, which is a little bigger than the one we had and has much better resolution. And this is one of those flip things, so I can flip it into kind of tablet mode, and it's acting wacky though. See, it doesn't work as well as smoothly as an iPad does. But there, after that, I can read a comic book on here, and it's a little bigger than the original page now on this size screen, and it's a very, very nice resolution. So the lines look really crisp and really nice. The colors look really great. So I think it would have been better to get an iPad Pro, the large size iPad Pro, but I think this will do me pretty well for some really nice digital reading experience. And maybe there's a bit of a learning curve because I don't use a Chromebook so often. Whoa. Okay. Anyway, so I've heard a lot of podcasts lately where people are saying, where some pros are saying the digital sales have plateaued. But I wonder if they'll slowly creep up as more and more people decide to go to more digital. Anyway, back to the physical. I also got Little Nemo in the Palace of Ice and Further Adventures. Some pretty heavy-duty Little Sambo blackface character in here, so that's interesting to try to place on a historical level. And anyway, yeah, it's a little uncomfortable for me when I see characters like that. These comics were from 1906. Not to excuse them, just to put them in some kind of historical context. But anyway, I think of that, even though that's actually still smaller than how that comic strip appeared. I think it was on a huge newspaper page covering the whole page. But I think of that as more of an art book than a comic book that I want to read or anything. And speaking of an art book, here is The Artist Within Book 2, which I must have backed on Kickstarter a couple of years ago. My name is in the back along with a big list of other people. After I backed this on Kickstarter, I looked for Volume 1, which was out of print, and actually got it used on Amazon extremely cheaply. Here's Mark Chirillo. But I guess I liked Volume... Well, this is bigger and has more photos in it, but a lot of the people, I don't know who they are. Mark Chirillo, I think... I get him confused. He's either an indie artist or the art director at DC. Donald Duck Edwing. This book is also, it's too big for me to hold up. So it's a very nice book, and I'm glad I backed it on Kickstarter, but it was a big surprise for me. And Ollie Olston, Chuck Jones, that's pretty cool. Bernie Wrightson is in here, and some other people that I know, but then a lot of people I don't know. Oh, and also I wanted to point, I got this out of the library. I wasn't going to look at more Trump satires because I'm not really interested in politics as a major form of entertainment. But this one, looking so much like one of the classic Marvel treasuries, when I saw it at the library, was just too much to pass up on. And a delight when I opened it up and discovered that every page is a cover homage with Donald Trump added in and some quotes from Donald Trump in the dialogue. So a lot of covers that I recognize. And funny to think that comic book nostalgia and political satire have come together. I thought they do an extremely good job of these satires in terms of visually. So I think if I can find a copy, I might buy one because I think as time goes by, it's an interesting historical artifact in a way, and just a very creative approach to political satire. harder to draw Trump the way Jim Lee would. I don't know if Jim Lee would draw him that way, actually. So that covers a lot of ground. I probably talked way longer than I planned. The one other thing that I was thinking about 2017, especially as the year developed, it was for me the year that comic book internet became more painful. And not just the internet, like podcasts and YouTube videos and Twitter. Maybe the podcasts also count as part of the internet, although there's something I play in my car. But too much stuff. Too much stuff that's not really about comics has entered into things. And so I have been enjoying, listening to tons of podcasts and watching tons of YouTube videos and reading lots of articles online and goofing around with people on Twitter. And then suddenly you just get this stuff that takes you out of the fun, coming from the left and the right in different, the podcasts I listen to seem to have some of occasionally the more politically correct left, you might say, stuff. And then on YouTube, more often I'll stumble across the opposite. Sometimes when I make the mistake of reading comments at the bottom of an article, I'll see all kinds of crazy stuff. And I can't resist listening or reading or glancing at some of this stuff, but then it puts you in a bad mood and it makes you feel like comics aren't as good as they are anymore, as good as they used to be or something. But then I was, looking at some end of the year lists and some people discussing that on Twitter, and I tried to think of it. I just quickly on Twitter typing in top 10 comics off the top of my head from 2017 and instantly had 11. And if I hadn't stopped myself, there would have been just more and more. There were still a lot of good comics out there. Some from Marvel and DC, some from Image, some from Aftershock and Oni and Boom and IDW. It's maybe a little more scattered. Maybe once upon a time, you could, during a certain period, you could just read Vertigo comics or just read Image comics. And now it doesn't, to find the best work. And now it doesn't feel that way. Like a few years ago, I was closely checking out every new Image comic and finding I liked most of them. And now I have to cast my net a little further to get the same effect. But it's still a really good time to be reading comic books, if kind of expensive. So that's my thought for the year. And I will talk to you in the new year. Bye-bye.